Welcome to another edition of Eye on the Issues. Today we are talking about education in the state of Wyoming, and who better to talk about that than the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and that is Megan Degenfelder. Thank you for joining us, Megan. How are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, the legislative session has begun. Of course, this is a financial legislative session, if you will. What does this session mean for you as the top person, if you will, in the state of Wyoming for education?
So it is a budget session this year, which means it's a consolidated timeline, and the primary focus is on the budget. And there's a higher threshold for other bills to be introduced. So number one, of course, is our budget. And not much has changed there. We have an 8% reduction due in large part to reduced federal funding. And so we're keeping an eye on that. Other education bills are really around parental rights, school choice that I'm tracking. Again, it's a high threshold to get bills passed in a general session, but we're going to try to push for some of those efforts just the same.
Okay. And in respect to explain to people that are watching that don't really understand how this is an abbreviated session, that makes a little bit of a difference.
Yes, so the budget session is only 4 weeks. So very short timeline. The deadlines for things like bills to be introduced or to get through a committee are just much more consolidated than they would in a general session, which is double the length, 8 weeks in our general session. Also, for a bill to be introduced that is not related to the budget, there has to be a 2/3 majority vote in order for that to be introduced. And so just to meet that requirement, it can be a difficult task.
And there was a timeline for that to happen. Was that the end of this week, or how is that to play out?
So tomorrow, Friday, the end of the first week, is the deadline for bills to make an introduction vote.
Gotcha. And if you had to say, these are the 3 bills that I care the most about, what would you say?
I would say our budget is number 1. Number 2 would be around strengthening parental rights. And then 3, education savings accounts to finally get a voucher system up and running in the state of Wyoming.
And tell us why you think a voucher system is important.
I'm just a really firm believer in school choice. I grew up in really the only community in Wyoming that provides for full school choice within the district. And I'm an economist by trade. And so I just feel that choice leads to better outcomes for all. And so even in rural Wyoming, we've got to look at ways to give families options.
And, you know, looking at the states, especially around the Mountain West, that's a lot of what you hear in the pushback is it's rural. There's not many schools. There's not many people. And that's kind of a little bit of a pushback. But when you come think about it, I mean, school choice is kind of it should be the American way, although public school education was so defined for such a long time that it's tough for people to think outside the box, wouldn't you say?
It is. A change is hard. And we're finding that after my first year in office, we're really pushing some very innovative, bold ideas. And that can ruffle feathers at times, but it's important. We've got to do it, and I think competition, no matter if it's in the private sector, if it's in our education space, is important. And for me, parental rights and choice go hand in hand, because in order for a parent to be able to direct and determine their child's education pathway, they have to have choices, and the ability to act on those choices is their right.
And in respect to parental rights, what does this measure that you're supportive of? Obviously, what does it say? How is it going to change things?
So I think number one, we have a lot of work to do on parental rights. And so I don't think that this bill solves all of those problems. But what it does is it requires that districts notify parents if there's a change in mental or physical health of their child. We have to open up that communication, especially when we talk about things like health. To me, a parent is the number one decision maker. They have a fundamental constitutional right to their child, whether it's their healthcare, their education, their values, their religion, all of those things. And I think sometimes we forget that our schools are only temporary custodians of our children, and that parents, they still maintain those rights even within the school walls.
And in respect to school choice, we're hearing more and more about school growth around the state, and some private, but also some, I guess, focused public schools, charter schools, if you will. that are growing around the state. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So last session, it was my first session in the role, and my number one priority was pushing for charter school legislation. And this was a historic change to our statutes, and it really opened the door for public charter schools in the state of Wyoming. And so very excited that we have 3 schools that are up and coming and in progress. Some were operational this year, another one hopefully later this fall. And so again, just broadening those choices. And to me, school choice exists in so many different ways within our traditional system, within the public space, and beyond into the private space as well.
So what kind of feedback, if any, are you hearing from the public in respect to school choice and parental rights and the measures you're pushing? What are you hearing from people?
We're having a tremendous amount of positive feedback and support. I think, I heard loud and clear on the campaign trail what people in Wyoming wanted out of their education system. And I firmly believe that education government should reflect the voices of its people. And so it's just been wonderful hearing the support from across the state as we pursue these efforts. Of course, there's always going to be folks that aren't on board, and change is hard, like I said, but we are steadily moving forward, and it's a very exciting time to be in Wyoming.
And speaking of being in Wyoming, what goes through your mind when you see some of these other states around the country that are shooting down school choice, that are shooting down parental rights in some respects? How do you respond to that, or what goes through your mind when you hear things like that are happening out there in America?
It's definitely troubling. And I think it's a reminder to us that Wyoming is not safe from these influences and from that change. And so it's more important than ever that we have systems in place in our statutes, in our policies that combat against that. And we also see, some other states moving away from merit. They're moving away from accountability of our schools. And that's something that I believe so much in. And we have to be vigilant on those topics.
And speaking about merit, I mean, you may have heard this, you may not have, but a number of Ivy League schools have situations where they can choose, I'm going to take a course pass fail. That's all it is. It just makes everything black or white.
It's disappointing what we're seeing. I mean, even universities moving away from standardized testing requirements, and it's just so unfortunate. Again, as an economist, competition matters. The whole American dream, our country, is based off of merit and in working hard and being successful. And so I hate to see that happening. We have to make sure that it stops in Wyoming and across the country.
Now, there's something called the Curriculum Transparency website. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yes, very excited that recently we released a curriculum transparency template and website for our school districts. I believe that the answer to many of these problems is transparency. How do we make sure that our parents, our communities know what's going on, whether it's government or our schools, and then they can effectuate change? And so when we talk about curriculum, I heard so many concerns during the campaign trail of curriculum that was biased and political in nature. And so again, transparency as a solution is the first step for me. And so what we did is we got 8 school districts on board to come together and solve what would be an adequate means of displaying that curriculum for the public. And so we have a website through the State Department of Education that, as more districts jump onto this effort, we will highlight that so that there can be a one-stop shop so that parents, community members across the state know what primary resources are being used in our schools.
So is this an original idea, or have you heard about other states doing this? Because it sounds like a phenomenal idea.
Well, I think some other states have played with it a little bit and used different vendors and that sort of thing. But really it was something that I thought about on the campaign trail and that I announced then before I even came into office, that I was going to have a curriculum transparency effort. And really, this is only the first step. I would like to see more transparency in every part of our education system. We released our assessment data, for example, in a more transparent way than ever before. And while some of that was unpopular to list different schools and their scores, I just think that transparency matters. And so we'll continue to do that, whether it's our contracts, whether it's, the materials that we use. Parents should know what's happening in their child's school.
And let's talk about the progress you've made in the state when it comes to public education since you become the superintendent. Tell us how you feel about what you've done so far.
I'm feeling really great about the momentum. And another thing that is very exciting and really historic is this partnership with the governor, the State Board of Education, to pilot competency-based learning. We're looking at how do we move away from this one-size-fits-all model, because we know the students learn differently. And again, this really fundamentally shakes up our education system. And so this means students moving at their own pace, students spending some time in the classroom, but then a lot of other time working for a company that has standards aligned with their workload. And so this will be a multi-year effort. But when I came into office, I wanted to get back to the focus of preparing students for jobs. I'm from the private sector. That should be our role. I think we get too distracted by all of these other things, and that should be the focus. And so very excited to see how that changes things. And to me, giving a child a pathway, an education they can feel confident about and excited about, that solves a lot of these issues, whether it's, some mental health issues, behavioral health issues. We've just really got to rethink how we educate kids.
And something you're hearing in some parts of the country anyhow, is something, in respect to, you've got a college education and it is here, and you have trade schools over here. And there's a lot of talk out there that more and more trade schools might be, in some cases, a better way to go for kids because of the expense of college. What are your thoughts on that?
So again, I'll say again, as an economist, it's all about return on investment. And we cannot set kids up for failure by pigeonholing them in one option that we know is not going to be as economic for them in the long term. And so my dream is that every child who graduates with a high school diploma also has a certificate in their back pocket. These are not exclusive. We can really tackle them together. And I think, again, career and technical education, it's one of my 6 strategic plan initiatives. I believe so much in it. And I think that, again, we've got to rethink and look at the numbers, set our kids up for success, and prepare them for jobs.
Okay. And if you had to pick 2 goals right now, or things you're working on that we haven't spoken about already, what would you throw out there that are on your radar, if you will?
Well, number one, continuing to provide parents with resources. We're looking at developing a list of parental rights that already exist and tools for parents, especially guidance around things like surveys, and so that parents know about their rights when it comes to education. And so we're very excited to be pushing that. More of this work-based learning, as I mentioned, where students are getting out of the classroom. We're aligning certain jobs and different activities to align to our standards. Just a tremendous amount. And then also, I would say, reducing bureaucracy. We are looking at slashing red tape everywhere possible. One example recently was cutting down on our standards, prioritizing standards at the state level. And then also we cut our Perkins plan, which is for career technical education funding through the federal government. We cut it in half. Because I said, we are not going to be more cumbersome than the federal government, not under my watch. And so we're looking at all things efficiency and reducing bureaucracy.
Fantastic. So how can the people that are going to watch this get back to you and give you feedback, give you ideas? How can they communicate with you?
Yes, well, so many different ways. We have Ask the Superintendent at wyo.gov. Those emails get to me and to correspond with individuals. This is a group community effort. And again, our education system, everything I do should reflect the needs and wants of community members. To consider hosting a town hall. This spring, we're going to begin town halls throughout the state where I will come and present on the state of education, what we're doing, receive feedback from community members. There's so many different ways from that, as well as speaking and being involved with the school board. School boards are so impactful. And so having a voice there, running for school board, communicating with them, that's really the beauty of our system, is having government as close to the people as possible. I believe in that. And so executing your rights and opportunities at those local levels.
Fantastic. Okay, I've got to read this to you. So I found a quote that you said that you would not let Joe Biden weaponize the school lunch program into a welfare program. Can you kind of explain that to us?
Yes. So under President Biden, he has tried to push out what is referred to as the summer EBT program. And they referred to it in many ways around school lunch programs for students. but it's not that at all. What it is it's creating a new welfare program that adds more money onto SNAP cards that parents can use in any manner in which they like. For me, our focus should be on existing programs. It should be on getting meals straight to the kids. And this program just doesn't do that. And I think it's disingenuous to use children and school lunch program to justify this increased welfare expansion.
Fantastic. And what am I not asking you? Is there anything else you want to cover while we're talking?
Ooh, man, we've covered a lot, I feel like, which is good.
Well, let me throw this out there for you then. And we might have talked about this last time we spoke, but I need to ask every time I have an interview though. What do you love most about living in the state of Wyoming?
Oh man, Wyoming is the most incredible state in the country. Just our ability to provide two of the things that I think are most important to lift people out of poverty and fulfill the American dream. We have access to affordable, reliable energy and a great education system. And those are two wonderful things. We have freedoms here that other states are not afforded. And really this mindset of to produce for ourselves. And it's just a beautiful place to be in. So.
Fantastic. Okay, so if anybody wants to learn more about what's going on around the state of Wyoming, go to yliberty.org. Superintendent Degenfelder, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.